there's more. Yes, confirmed. We're doing back-to-back episodes. Hello, Philippines, and hello, world. We are live from Manila. The Asian Network for Free Elections, or ANFEL, just launched its final election observation report on the 2025 national and local elections in the Philippines. The report, which reflects the collective observation of ANFEL international election observers deployed across the country, provides insights about particular areas of the election that affect the overall electoral integrity and offers a set of recommendations in all areas of concern to improve on. One particular aspect of the report, which ANFREL piloted during the 2025 Philippine elections, is the organization's social media monitoring effort in partnership with the Carter Center. The Philippines has been tagged as patient zero of how the spread of disinformation could derail electoral integrity, referring to the supposed effectiveness of disinformation campaigns in the 2016 elections. Mis- and disinformation campaigns continue to be rampant, not just during elections, but also in critical developments and events, shaping and influencing political and other important discourse in the Philippines and around the world. For the 2025 Philippine elections, the Commission on Election issued resolution number 11064, or I will quote the exact title of the guideline, Guidelines on the Use of Social Media, Artificial Intelligence, and Internet Technology for Digital Election Campaign and the Prohibition and Punishment of its misuse for disinformation and misinformation in connection with the 2025 national and local elections and the parliamentary elections of quote. That's the exact title of the resolution. The guidelines included provisions for the registration of social media accounts, websites, and other digital internet-based platforms utilized for campaigning. It also mandated the disclosure of any use of AI in campaign materials and prohibited the misuse of social media, AI, and internet technology to spread mis- or disinformation during elections. While limited to official online campaign platforms, the COMELEC's efforts to address mis- and disinformation is a step towards promoting a healthy information ecosystem and campaign environment amid the pervasive spread of mis- and disinformation. In this special episode, why I keep saying pilot now, of the Election Observer podcast, we'll discuss ANFREL and the Carter Center's social media monitoring efforts in the Philippines, recommendations to address the supposed infodemic, and reflections moving forward. I'm your host, Sean Antiquera, and we are live via ANFREL's Facebook, not LinkedIn page, as well as via ANFREL's YouTube channel. The episodes of the Election Observer podcast can be streamed later on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Joining us in this special episode are Riza Rosales, ANFREL Executive Director, Olivia Liu, Data Analyst at the Carter Center, and Dan Richardson, Program Associate at the Carter Center. Hello, Briza, Olivia, and Dan. Welcome to the Election Observer podcast.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me and having us. Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
happy to be here. Thank you, John.
Thanks for the time. That's good to know. I know this is your first time in the Philippines. How has it been so far?
We can start with rainy, but it's been lovely. Food's been great. People have been great. So just powering through the rain.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Everyone's been so welcoming, and we keep saying, it's been so rainy this time, but that's just a reason to come back when it's not rainy.
Yeah, I actually have a song for that. It's been raining in Manila.
You have to learn that song.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Hello.
Earlier, when people knew that we will have a podcast, they said, asked me to sing. That's the song for you guys. That's it. So for my first question, in general, I just wanted to help our audience also understand, in general, how pervasive is the spread of mis- and disinformation during elections? Not just in the Philippine elections, but in other elections that you have observed. And how does it affect electoral integrity?
Well, I can start just by saying, for context for the audience, the Carter Center, specifically the democracy program at the Carter Center, has been observing and monitoring social media since 2018. We've done it in about 15 different countries. So while, of course, that is not nearly the data set that you'd want to speak on this with true authority, we do have good experience. And I can start just by saying it's hard to quantify. Naturally, none of us have all the data we would need to speak to this with 100% confidence unless you're a tech company and you have access to that whole ecosystem of data. But what I can say is it is, in the modern mindset of elections, it continues to present itself to be an issue as the main concern around mis and disinformation, besides it being, a way to cloud discourse, is that it can lead to undermining the electoral process and the trust in it. It can lead to undermining the voter participation in the process. It can also then, create electoral violence, create partisan conflict, and can really, target specific political opponents. And this is usually done through false and misleading. That's the main definition between dis and misinformation, right? Is one is intentional dis and one is, could be accidental. And so it continues to play a role, and while it's really hard to quantify a specific number, the issue is the perception of the election, regardless of whether it's, just vaguely like 5% of the discourse online or 50%, it can undermine the entire electoral process if it's not mitigated and addressed.
Yeah, I'll add that, with the development of artificial intelligence over the past few years, that's just allowed mis and disinformation to be created and propagated at, number one, at such a scale. And number two, it can just get more and more believable with the types of images and deepfakes, videos that are able to be generated now. It's a risk right now, and it's a risk looking into the future as these tools continue to develop and get even more convincing.
Yeah, just to add also, I could say monitoring the different countries across Asia at least, I could say that it is embedded in our information ecosystem right now, because what used to be a fringe or isolated content before, right now it's spreading rapidly with the rise of the social media platforms through the help of sophisticated algorithms and micro-targeting tools. So it's there already. But looking back also, at least the very essence of this information, it has been present since the invention of the print. So this information was there already, running as a propaganda used by our historical, thoughts. But at the same time, right now, as you've mentioned, it really affects, especially the electoral public discourse and at least the voter participation. Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, because you also mentioned about the use of AI and the rise in the use of AI in disinformation campaigns. I know last year during the super election year, this was a particular concern because we've seen in some elections that they've used AI in campaigning. I think in particular, Indonesia was one of the use cases of AI and effectiveness of AI in use in campaigning. But now, how do you think AI has been used in disinformation? Is it what people feared in last election, or have we not seen much AI use in disinformation campaigns?
I think in general, in a lot of observation that we have conducted, we've been surprised at how low the rates of the use of artificial intelligence have been. I'll say one interesting anecdote that we learned at a conference recently was that oftentimes, if a candidate will say something unpopular, there's kind of the threat that a candidate may claim that something was AI generated that wasn't. So that's kind of equally a threat, that someone might kind of, as a defense mechanism, if they are getting, criticized for a particular statement, they might kind of back out and claim that it wasn't truly them speaking. So that's an interesting threat that I don't know that we really anticipated, but has been interesting to hear about.
I think I can add that, of course, in our experience, limited as it is, we've not seen a pervasive amount of abuse by AI. But what we all have to keep in mind, of course, is that the different models that are being advanced every couple months, and God forbid every couple years now, they're getting better. I mean, what we saw last year at this time versus what has been, models can push out now, and how real it is. It used to be able to do that, like that old test where you look at the hands, right, and you try to count the fingers. It's advanced beyond that now, and so it's just important to keep in mind while it's, it may be used in unique ways at this moment, we need to prepare ourselves for where we're going to be in 6 months or 5 years.
Yeah, we can only, comment on what we've detected. It's, I know a lot of coordinated inauthentic like influence campaigns are identified, specifically with the use of AI through, some tweets will leave pieces of the prompt in the tweet or pieces of that kind of signal to, people monitoring the content that it was AI generated. But, without those signals, it can be really difficult to be sure whether or not AI has been used. So really paramount to, be thinking about that in the realm of disinformation moving forward.
Yeah. No, yeah, of course. We're not yet there. But I just have one hope that hopefully Philippines will not pilot the misuse of AI. Because when we were tagged as patient zero in 2016, that was the rise of a lot of research, a lot of monitoring that happened right after. So hopefully Philippines will not pilot its misuse.
Let's hope for the best.
Yes.
Okay, let's move to the ANFRO the Carter Center partnership. ANFRO partnered with the Carter Center for Social Media Monitoring during the 2025 Philippine elections. I know, as you've said, the Carter Center has been doing social media monitoring in other countries in the past, but this is a pilot program for us at ANFRO. I just wonder, how did the partnership come about? What were your initial thoughts and about the monitoring and during the elections in the Philippines?
Yeah, probably I could answer. Yeah. So organizationally, of course, we are acknowledging our limitations with regard to technical capacity and resources. The very first thing is that we don't have the tool, but we have this commitment to innovate and at the same time to go beyond our limits, beyond the traditional election observation that we have been practicing for the past 28 years. So this collaboration is actually to initiate a systematic approach on how to do it, because that has been the question when monitoring the elections. You're monitoring the traditional way, but the rise of the digital platforms, it's somehow we need to be parallel on it, because it's really hard to curb disinformation and misinformation, but we need to be expert somehow on providing methodologies on how to do it. And we're just very thankful for the partnership with the Carter Center, because you already practice it for the very long time, and we have seen your work, and at the same time, it is just high time and crucial time to do it in the Philippines.
And I can add to that. It's just the nature that how many elections are going on a year, how many in each country every couple months. We all need to do a better job about disseminating the ability to do this work, especially as, it's not necessarily this conversation, but like as international aid and whatnot has changed, we have to be more resilient and collaborative and trying to find solutions to these larger issues. And so this was a great opportunity for Carter Center to partner with ANFRO. We've had experience in the Philippines, but not quite the legacy that ANFRO has. And so it was just a great opportunity to try to impart some knowledge, but also look and pilot an initial collaboration. And then, as we look at different elections in different countries and also in the Philippines down the line, about how we can do this and make this a more sustainable collaboration.
Olivia, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think they both covered it really well. I think this has been an exciting, opportunity. I feel like, we met in Sri Lanka kind of on separate engagements, and so it's really nice to be here in the Philippines and be working together.
But how did you feel with the collaboration, John? That's my question to you.
No, how do I explain? No, ANFRO has in the past considered, of course, monitoring social media, but as you've said, we don't really have the capacity in terms of
the tool,
resources, the tool to do it. The will is there, but it's just that, of course, you need resources for it. So we have always been thinking about monitoring. For me, it's kind of, when you told me about the project, it's kind of exciting at the same time scary, because we've never done it before.
Yeah.
So, and we've talked about this during the early stages of the project, that and this is very important to me, that we approach it with openness, and that we accept if we make mistakes
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way, right? And that we be more forgiving of ourselves.
Yeah.
That was what
Actually,
I
we were
said.
like that.
Yes, because it is kind of scary and you want to get it right. But then, of course, you have to give yourself time and space to make mistakes because you will commit mistakes after all. You're human, right?
And I totally agree. Just to add that, like, since we've been monitoring since 2018 in all these different countries, the methodology is always changing.
Yeah.
You're going to finish the report, you're going to look back later, and you're going to be like, well, we could have looked at this area more. We could have run a different type of analysis. We missed this actor set. Well, whatever it may be. So it's just a great recognition to have, and back to this idea that also, like, you have the will, but maybe not the resources. It's the perfect moment for collaboration because while we may have the real resources, we can't be everywhere at once. So it's just finding the synergy.
Yes. So talking about methodology, can you walk us through how you conducted the social media monitoring for, of course I know this, but for the people who are watching the podcast episode this afternoon, can you walk us through how you conducted the social media monitoring for specifically for the 2025 Philippine elections? What was the methodology in terms of data gathering, processing, and analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as some of you listening may know, the COMELEC Resolution 11064 required all candidates and party lists to register their official online campaign platforms with the COMELEC. And so kind of in early February, we had, a preliminary list. We, as the Carter Center, worked with NFREL to upload all of the registered social media accounts for senatorial candidates and party lists to our social media monitoring tool, which is called Junkipedia. Junkipedia is a tool that has been developed and maintained by the National Conference on Citizenship, which is our partner organization, and specifically the Algorithmic Transparency Institute at the National Conference on Citizenship. Especially kind of since the demise of CrowdTangle, it's been, a real one of the only resources out there that allows us to kind of do this, to do this systematic social media monitoring. So with the tool Junkipedia, once you upload an account to the platform will automatically harvest the 800 most recent posts uploaded to that account, and then every hour it will pull any newly published posts into the database. And so kind of once those accounts are uploaded, they are just constantly coming in with new data. And any posts that are removed stay in the tool after they're removed, which is another really useful tool for us. And so we were able to monitor all 66 of the senatorial candidates and 148 of the 156 party lists across 5 platforms. And that was Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube. And so across those 5 platforms, we monitored 294 social media accounts in total. And we wanted to make sure to capture the campaign period in its entirety, and then also, about 2 weeks roughly after the election, to get a sense of kind of the energy of the digital campaign environment kind of from start to finish. And so we monitored from February 9th through May 24th. And from those 294 social media accounts, we cataloged into the tool over 60,000 social media posts.
That's a lot.
A lot.
Yes, it is a lot. And so, because it's so many posts, and we, this initiative was initially designed to monitor around the COMELEC resolution. But we as the Carter Center also kind of have a standardized social media monitoring code book that we implement across electoral contexts. So we can both kind of do a comparative analysis of, social media content kind of cross-nationally. And also, since we've been implementing this since 2023, the goal is to be able to compare, the social media environment in different countries over time. And so that's, our code book has about 90 different coding items that we look at for each social media post. And, with the Comelec resolution, we had about 10 additional ones. So that's a lot of, human effort to go through coding the posts. And so we had a team of monitors through TCC and ANFREL that worked together to code a randomized 10% sample of the posts that we collected. We made sure to be pulling 10% of the posts coming in each week so that we covered, the entire monitoring period kind of uniformly. Of course, we saw a significant surge in content in the week leading up to the election. We're also aware that, that's kind of a crucial time that, voters can potentially be swayed. In the lead up to the election, so we coded about 25% of the posts that came in that week to compensate for that. So that's kind of a general overview of the process. Happy to dive into kind of some more specifics on what we coded for, if you'd like.
I must say no, because I tried coding, but I have to be honest that I did not code much, but it is quite difficult to code, and it's a lot to cover. 10% of the 60,000 posts were coded, so that's a lot, and it took a lot of effort, of course, from the coders to go through these social media posts, because we went through everything. So if it's like a video post,
You need to watch
you
it.
watch the entire video, right? Yeah. Did you experience it, Lisa?
No, but probably just to add, to give context about the COMELEC resolution, because it was implemented first 2019. So under the perspective that the problem during the 2016 election was the trolls, the bots, and the anonymity. That's why COMELEC wants to address by compliance. You're asking the candidates and the political parties to register their official social media pages. But that time, they're also asking to register the affiliate pages. But it's really hard to determine how would you define official and affiliate. So right now, they are implementing the official ones only because it's really hard to define what is an affiliate page. So yeah, with regard to the methodology, so we were confined to monitor the official social media pages in line with the COMELEC resolution.
Okay. So what were the key findings of the social media monitoring?
Absolutely. So we kind of divide the Carter Center's coding items into, democratic content versus undemocratic content. When we think about democratic content that's, encouraging voters to engage in the electoral process. It might be, candidates announcing campaign events, recapping past campaign events, endorsing one another. Also engagement with kind of public policy is also something that we see as, a strong piece of democratic engagement, information sharing, and, calls to democratic political behavior. So calls to register, calls to vote, calls to, volunteer on behalf of a campaign. So those are all the sorts of things that we look at when we talk about democratic content. Then we kind of have the undemocratic content side of things. We think about that. The two major categories of that are, hate speech and mis and disinformation. We also look at calls to violence. And then, there's speech out there that's critical of other candidates, but there's some speech that is really kind of verging on hate speech or really, spreading false information about a candidate to undermine them. So that's what we kind of label as discrediting speech. So with those kind of two main categories in mind, out of our social media monitoring corpus, we saw, about 70% of the content that we coded was democratic in nature. Again, this is just restricted to candidates and party lists, so it's not a reflection of the online social media environment as a whole. But that's a positive finding in itself. We saw lots of posts engaging in endorsements, lots of posts recapping past campaign events. We saw, I think, about 30% of our posts engaged in at least one key public policy theme, engaging, topics. I think the top 3 topics that we found were the economy, public service provision, and human rights. So those are all, really salient topics, and we like to see candidates and party lists, engaging in substantive policy conversations. We saw, proactive information sharing, a number of different posts that were, sharing information related to their party platforms, sharing polling results, often that were, complimentary of whoever was sharing those results. And then also posts that were out there kind of debunking false claims that were circulating. So that's kind of an overview of the Democratic content. When we also look over time, that Democratic content outpaced the undemocratic content for the entirety of the observation period. So good to see that, undemocratic content didn't surge after the election or anything like that. Then when we think about undemocratic content, we saw that made up only about 2% of our coded corpus, which is really low. The undemocratic content that we did see, we saw some discussions of election irregularities, but these were, less coordinated efforts to undermine the election and more, voters expressing genuine concerns. We also saw, a significant portion of that discrediting speech that I mentioned before, and, less than 1% of the posts that we collected were coded as mis and disinformation. So, again, not reflective of the environment as a whole, but really positive to see that this harmful content is being published at such a low rate. Then kind of moving on to the meat of the findings, what this was all for, thinking about the Kamalek resolution and our findings in relation to that. Similarly, we found only 0.2% of our coded corpus. For context, that's 16 posts out of 6,400 that we coded were flagged as potentially violating the Kamalek resolution. And those were flagged as spreading kind of unverified or manipulated content that could undermine public trust in the election, or spreading false or alarming reports about election integrity. Notably, none of the posts that were flagged for spreading false information about election delays, which is, a regulation of the resolution and also a concern that could, obstruct voters from successfully voting. And we also saw no evidence of coordinated inauthentic behavior through bots or troll farms. That kind of reminds me I should back up and say, in the harmful content category, the undemocratic content category, we saw no instances of hate speech or calls to political violence, which is significant and not something that we've seen in other country contexts. Then zooming back into the Kamalek resolution, kind of have 3 potential explanations for why the instances of potential violations of the resolution were so low. Kind of the first interpretation is that the Kamalek resolution did what it set out to do, that it was successful in discouraging that type of content coming from candidates and party lists. The second interpretation is that candidates and party lists are not the people who are circulating this type of content, that it's other. At the Carter Center, we refer to them as elite actors. So that's people who hold political power or wield political influence in the social media space. That could be shadow pages, supporter pages, social media influencers, the media, all other different sorts of actors that have the potential to really influence the online campaign environment, but are not labeled as official campaign platforms. Then kind of the third arm of, potential interpretations is that this content is circulating on, platforms other than the platforms we monitored. And, we see a lot of evidence of, this type of harmful content shifting to closed private and or encrypted spaces to avoid that type of oversight that we see, the COMELEC trying to conduct through this resolution. So, again, we aren't social media platforms, so we can't definitively say which of the three interpretations is true in this case.
Yep.
But I think, a positive finding in itself that, the violations of the resolution were so low.
No, I remember having a discussion about this as well, because one of our hunch, I guess, is that probably candidates wouldn't use their official platforms
Of course.
to spread this information and all that. But that for this particular monitoring, what we also wanted to capture was what is the kind of campaigning that these candidates are doing online, because we've seen it in the Philippine campaign environment, how sometimes things can be dirty and vile. Just in the 2025 elections, we've had candidates who fat-shamed somebody, who said, who offered to have somebody sleep with him.
Yeah.
I think this candidate was disqualified, no?
Yeah, a case was filed against
So there
him.
were these kinds of campaigning that you can see in the Philippine campaign environment. So I think part of the social media monitoring effort was to really capture how the campaigning of these candidates were online, at least. So it's good to hear what you found. And of the three that you've mentioned, of course, we wouldn't be able to know which one actually made it. So, but I guess moving to my next question, if you don't have anything to add to it, is that in terms of the effort of the election management body, particularly the COMELEC, to address this information during elections, do you think it was sufficient? And I have a follow-up on it, aside from the COMELEC resolution, did ANFEL observe other efforts to combat mis and disinformation from election management body and other electoral stakeholders?
Probably I can answer. Yeah, but we are happy to see the establishment of the task force. So we call it Task Force KKK.
Please explain the KKK,
The KKK,
in context.
I hope I will hit the right words. Katarungan, katapatan, katotohanan. Right?
Katotohanan, katapatan,
tarungan.
katarungan. Sa halalan.
Sa halalan. So katapatan is honesty.
Honesty.
Katotohanan is truth.
Truth.
And katarungan is justice.
Justice.
Yeah.
Not
So-
the KKK
Yeah.
that you might think of.
That was an important clarification very early on.
To clarify what it is.
Yeah.
So that's Task Force KKK. So it was primarily created, of course, to combat mis and disinformation. It's actually an evolution that came from dissolution from 2019, 2022, and now 2025. And we were happy to see and monitor that there was also a coordination mechanism among election stakeholders. They partnered with different government agencies, especially the Department of Information and Communications and Technology, and at the same time partnering with different civil society organizations. But to answer if it is sufficient, probably there's more to see because one, we haven't seen an active monitoring on the part of the COMELEC, at least on the part of publication, because we were hearing them we consulted with them that they reported out so many posts across different platforms, but we are hoping to see a publication of that kind of action coming from the COMELEC. And at the same time, we are hoping to see a dedicated personnel doing that because we actually believe that a stronger institution with having a right framework to combat disinformation, misinformation is actually needed because that's what we are seeing across Asia. If you have a good and strong EMB plus a framework, so at least you are doing something and you are heading it on effectively. So that's what we want to see in the Philippines as one of the initiatives coming from the EMB. But talking to other stakeholders, yes, actually talking to them when we were having key informant interviews and actually consultation with them, there were a lot of parallel efforts. There were fact-checking organizations actively doing it, although the limitation was their sources. So how long can you do fact-checking, right? So the resources is one of the problem. And then at the same time, you would see civil society organizations doing their own parallel monitoring, but going back to the same problem. The problem is resources and having this available tool to do the monitoring, because when CrowdTangle was that
Discontinued.
discontinued, so it has become a problem for all civil society organizations, not only from NGO side but also for the academe. So that has been a challenge for everyone.
And if I may, I'd just like to add that, I mean, saying whether Kamalak did a good job or not is inherently difficult with the exercise that we just conducted. It was very limited in scope and whatnot, so I'm glad you answered first. But I do want to say that credit where it's due, Kamalak is making great efforts. And we work in many different countries and many different contexts where we don't always see that effort taken. So that just needs to be acknowledged first. But also, when we're talking about whether it's effective or not, it comes to this question of like, what are you measuring against, right? What's the baseline? And so understanding the parallel efforts that are going around, getting consortiums together to really measure the problem and try to like set, it's difficult, of course, but like, goals, as abstract as they may be in this kind of context, but to try to like create good available information for individuals to help dispel dis or misinformation. Because there are only so many strategies, right? In the same way that Kamalek will not be the institution to address all or misinformation, there's no silver bullet, if you will, right? So you have to increase the amount of good information with fact-checking and supporting them with resources and tools to be able to do the work sustainably, even outside of electoral cycles, which is very difficult to do. But then you have to decrease that supply of dubious information, as I like to use, and through also fact-checking, but also just creating a populace with this third kind of intervention that can distinguish the difference for themselves. And so having a litany of different resources available, having the Kamalak involved, having stakeholders both from civil society, from platforms, from academics to media houses, it takes truly a multimodal approach to try to blunt the effect of mis and disinformation.
Yeah, I think, there's kind of two different ways to address mis and disinformation that we talk about. There's debunking and then there's pre-bunking. So we just heard from Kamalek earlier today at the report launch that, they actively debunked, I think, more than 80 false narratives that they identified through their kind of engagement with different civil society organizations. And so that's really positive to see, when false information is circulating, it's really important to kind of address it as soon as possible through, public statements that kind of are corrective in nature. And then kind of the other side of things, Dan mentioned, the importance of proactive, education, helping people be able to tell the difference. We also talk about it as pre-bunking. So that's basically, reducing the likelihood that people will believe false narratives when those false narratives come up. And so, a lot of the, ways that you can do that is through, proactive voter education content. We saw Kamalek really engaging on social media, posting content about, the election, different audits that they were holding, all of that. That's really positive, and that in itself kind of promotes a sense of election integrity that then when someone is, faced with a piece of information that tries to undermine that feeling of election integrity, they've got kind of a basis, a foundation of voter education content that kind of will make them more likely to question the false narrative and, steel them against that. So that was another, I think, really positive thing that we saw Kamalek doing. Again, I think there's ways to, make sure that that content reaches more people. And, that's definitely something we are thinking about and I think we'll continue to think about in the future.
Just a follow-up. No, I think I would be amiss if I don't ask it, because as international observers who have vast experience in observing other elections in other countries, I realized that I should have modified the question earlier a bit. But like, have you seen other good practices of other election management bodies in other countries that could be considered here in the Philippines in terms of addressing disinformation?
That's a hard question though. Because if you will take a look at the pattern of different countries, at least for Asia, they have a common enemy. In the Philippines, we don't have that. Yeah. When saying common enemy, for example, I'm not sure if I want to speak about a country, but for example, in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, the main problem in the digital space is digital violence. So they have a common enemy. So in the Philippines, we are really polarized. So for me, it's really scattered. But what I am seeing in the different countries is that the action of the EMB. So that's why I am pinpointing on a stronger institution, a stronger mechanism, and a good framework to take action on it. Because in different countries, you have different contexts, you have different problems. But with the pattern, I'm seeing that they have common enemy.
A common enemy.
Yeah.
Let's make you the common enemy.
No, I think that's a great answer, and I would just echo very similarly. Like our colleague on the Digital Threats to Democracy team in Atlanta is looking at comparative laws around online expression. And it's tricky because it's this idea that you can like look at one country and say, oh, this law is working super effectively, right? But you can't necessarily just take it and apply it to another situation because of the context, right? And how it could be, either not enforced or weaponized, right? So ultimately, it's a very difficult question, a great one. But I would agree with Breeza. We've worked in quite a few countries where there is not this kind of mandate from an EMB to try to be impartial, to be fair, transparent, and then tackle these big issues with so many different stakeholders.
Yeah, it feels like there's just, it's very difficult to have all of the building blocks that you need. Yeah. Either, we see a lot of instances where, EMBs are just lacking in resources to do the types of things like, systematic social media monitoring. Yes. We'll see that, the legal framework isn't in place to really, create enforcement mechanisms, and then kind of straight from that, there can be laws in place that are kind of not executed in practice. So I think that, again, we talk about, AI rapidly developing. I think the disinformation space is really changing so quickly, and it's difficult for anyone to keep up.
Okay. So, as you know, this is a super election year for the Philippines, with 2 more elections scheduled.
Hopefully 2.
Hopefully 2 more elections scheduled. One is the BARM parliamentary elections in October, and the other one, hopefully, is the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan Village or Youth Council elections in December. Moving forward, in a short period of time, I know Anne Frel had like the short, medium term, long term recommendations. So this would be very useful for you. No? In a short period of time remaining, what could be improved in terms of addressing the spread of disinformation during elections? These are critical. These are BARM is a regional election, while Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan is a national election, but it is an election within the small communities in the Philippines.
I can start by saying the timeline matters. I'm sure Anne Frel and Breeza, y'all just finished one cycle, right? It's always hard to then look and see the next cycle right there with you. It always comes quicker than you think. When it comes to monitoring, it's no different, right? And so, understanding the actor list that you'd want to look at again, whether they be official accounts, would be one thing. But as I think that we learned through this pilot exercise, and it was a hunch that I'm sure many of us would have shared, that those accounts may not be the main vectors of misinformation. So the goal of monitoring and what we're trying to then identify in the next exercise would need to be sized up. Do we want to try to create affiliate like ecosystems that are identified to understand who the driver of mis or disinformation is. Do we want to do social media network analyses to try to understand the different players and groups in play? I mean, for a regional election, it's a little simpler. The nationwide local elections, that's a much bigger challenge, of course. But for October, you could start thinking about just trying to understand, like you have your known quantities, you have your known pages, and then try to, from there, build out a more comprehensive actualists and elites, as Olivia refers to them, or the Carter Center. And then from there, try to distill, what's driving it, who's driving it, and then provide those kind of recommendations on how to maybe mitigate that impact to Kamala.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that there's, a potential for, sort of voluntary reporting mechanism of those types of posts where, CSOs can kind of collect instances, they review those instances, escalate, them to the COMELEC, and then the COMELEC can decide whether or not to escalate those to platforms. So I think that it's difficult to talk about, expanding the COMELEC resolution to, subject people that aren't candidates or party lists to regulation by law, because that can get really tricky when it comes to, freedom of speech. But I think that, there's, election mis and disinformation is, disallowed on a lot of platforms even. And so just kind of creating mechanisms to report that and kind of making sure that, the people, that there's just kind of a reporting structure for, I think CSOs are a great kind of first resource for them to be collecting, information on, potentially problematic posts from their communities and then escalating them as necessary.
Yeah. Actually, just to add, the COMELEC resolution already covers the BARM parliamentary elections and the
long title of it. No?
Yes.
It says in the bar. Yes.
Yes. So practically, it might be good to do the same kind of monitoring for this BARM parliamentary elections because it's historic. It's really unique. For me, there's an unknown part to be explored for this BARM parliamentary elections because looking at it, you would see the dynamics coming from the national and you would see the unique dynamics coming from the BARM. Because looking at the numbers, we only have 13 or 14 accredited regional political parties. So there will only be 13 official social media pages, or at least double it, you will be having 26. And you have a smaller number of district representative candidates. And the sectoral, I think, they're not part of the personnel that they need to report out their official social media accounts. So apart from doing it systematically, I think this is the best time to look outside the official social media candidates because although you would be needing more coders, especially to understand the context, you will be dealing with different local languages because you need to deal the culture of the island and the mainland. So actually, it's a good opportunity to explore what we can do for the BARM because, just like what I mentioned, this is also first time for the Philippines. And doing the first time and to explore what we can do is a very opportune time for us to do it.
Just a follow-up, I realized, although this is in the questions that we said, we haven't asked you about your recommendations based on your observation, monitoring of social media during the 2025 elections. What are these recommendations, if you have any?
Yeah, I mean, we can start by just continuing the work that COMELEC's doing. The Task Force KKK is a great initiative that just needs to be continued. ANFRIL, in the reporting that they finalized or published today, commended the process or COMELEC for being transparent, but still with the call to be more transparent. And so I think that it applies just as much into this application of social media monitoring. And to that end too, as Breeze has mentioned, developing the capacity for COMELEC to handle this initiative themselves. Not saying that they shouldn't still collaborate with different stakeholders, that's still key, but developing the ability to corroborate for themselves and not being reliant on others would really build sustainable success long term. and then continuing, like there's a disclosure around AI in the resolution, of course, but like continuing to think about AI going forward and just like the scale with which the COMLAC will have to engage with it and the potentially, maybe not this year, right? Depends on the development of the models, right? But for 2028, most assuredly.
Absolutely. And then just kind of, I know I keep bringing this up, but just the importance of media literacy education, you know, empowering people to be able to identify potential election-related mis and disinformation, and, you know, being able to identify AI-generated content is really crucial, especially if we're thinking about, you know, if that branch number 3 of our potential interpretation of the resolution that, you know, this harmful content is largely moving into spaces that are closed or private or encrypted that we can't monitor.
Yeah.
You know, social media monitoring or removal of, you know, posts, you know, on some of these encrypted platforms is, you know, violates the platform policies. And so really the way to address mis and disinformation in those cases is through, you know, proactive education efforts. I think both for voters and also for, you know, candidates and party lists. You know, I think that we see, you know, really consistently that, you know, candidates from particular vulnerable groups, I think, you know, women candidates being a major example, you know, are disproportionately subject to hate speech, mis and disinformation narratives about them. And so, you know, thinking about empowering, you know, candidates from potentially vulnerable groups through digital hygiene and safety trainings also, I think is key kind of looking forward.
Yeah, actually.
Did you feel the light? It suddenly got lighter.
No, just to add, probably I would just like to highlight the recommendation of having an expert advisory board. Because aside from technical expertise, we need to harness the experience of other countries as well.
Yeah.
So probably I'm looking at the Asian Electoral Stakeholder Forum. So that's one topic that can be discussed. Who can commit to it? Which country can commit to it? So an expert advisory board would be it's a sound and practical recommendation. Yeah.
Okay. Lastly, before we ask you to invite our viewers, our audience, to download and read the newly launched report, can you share with us what we can expect in the future? Are there any plans for more collaboration?
Hopefully. Hopefully looking at Dan and Olivia. Yeah, for ANFREL, of course, if resources will allow us, BARM will be a good monitoring exercise again. And looking at the elections that will happen this year or up to next year, Bangladesh is a good candidate to do this kind of social media monitoring.
Totally agreed. And this was a great experience for the Carter Center, and it's always great to work with the ANFREL and just see, just what high quality observation looks like and have that local knowledge. So however we can make it work, whether it be for the BRAM in October, Bangladesh and next spring, it'd be delightful. And it was there's so much to build on from this exercise, as limited as it was. And that we can take it in so many different places to address the litany of externalities that come out of elections and information. So, absolutely, yeah. I think even thinking ahead to the 2028 elections here,
I
think we'll discuss a lot that starting to implement voter education activities at the start of the campaign period is often too late in the game. People have made their decisions. Candidates have already declared and kind of are not going to have the space to engage in the types of digital hygiene and safety trainings that we might want to engage with. So just also thinking about the opportunity to make use of a 3-year runway looking ahead to that election is something that I know the Carter Center is really interested in and would love to talk about ways to continue collaboration with ANFREL.
Okay. I was actually just want to let you to ask you to invite the people to download the report, but I suddenly remembered Attorney Helen's Dream Reader. So, the challenge for the
Shout
three of
out
you
to
is,
Attorney Helen.
the challenge for the three of you is, if you would invite your dream reader of the report to read it, how would you address your dream reader?
It's great.
If you are to address your dream reader, read this, how would you do it? I know this is not in our card.
Yeah.
No, something popped in my mind because on Monday it will be the State of the Nation address, and I've mentioned earlier that my dream reader is the President of the Philippines because he would identify the priority bills that should be passed in the next 3 years. So hopefully, if I'll be talking to him, hopefully he
Please
will.
look at the camera
Yeah,
and address the
hopefully you can
president.
mention it. You can mention about our report in the sauna. So that's a dream. Hopefully it will be a dream come true.
How
yeah,
about
and I answered this earlier with, I think, in addition to kind of the political elite having access to the report, I think, the average Filipino voter is also someone who could really benefit from the information that's in the report. So I hope that, it does reach a lot of voters, and, it's really important content, and I've heard it may be up there for one of the thickest ANFREL reports yet.
Yes.
Maybe don't scare the readers.
They will not read it.
You'll love every page.
So I'll take your challenge literally, and I will literally look at the camera,
This is your camera.
and I will just say, hey you, get off your phone, get off TikTok, take a moment to learn about how information in the most recent Philippine election impacted the outcome, the process. Learn more about what could be done better the next election. It's not short, but it'd be a lot of fun. So that's what I got.
That was inspiring.
Again, thank you, Briza, Olivia, and Dan, for joining us today. And that has been the Election Observer podcast episode on monitoring social media during the 2025 Philippine elections. Get the latest news and updates about ANFREL programs and activities through our Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and TikTok pages. You can also subscribe to our YouTube and WhatsApp channel. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow the Election Observer podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe to the Election Observer on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for joining us again today. I'm your host, John Antiquera. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I also need to end it from my side. End.